We're live. We'll just breathe. I like the hat. If I would have known I had permission to wear a hat, I would have wore a hat. I hate how my hair looks usually. Pulled back, hairline
You
going
got
up.
some flow, man. You don't need to be hiding that. I've got a
That's
buzz cut since 8th grade.
well, that's good too. That's economical. I mean, that's just like functional. I appreciate the utilitarian idea with the cut, but I spent time in New Mexico as a kid, and it's like your hair kind of comes from your soul.
Yeah.
If I could, I would wear like the braids, like the Indian
Oh, then we'll be
braids.
talking. You can do it,
Yeah,
man.
one of these days. One of these days. All right, let's go live. Should you empty your waiver wire wallet on Damien Harris? That and more this week on the couch. Maiden Couch Voyage with Ian Hartitz. PFF, he also knows work from Motor World previously. Ian, are we going strong to the hole for Damien Harris?
What's going on, man?
Yeah.
Not really. No, I think we're looking at just Sony Michel, maybe a slightly better version. But the unfortunate thing is, man, I mean, I don't want to hype up Sony too much. I know it's been far more lows than highs, but the game he played in week 3 was truly, I think, the best I've seen him looks maybe ever at a minimum since 2018. I mean, dude was breaking tackles, actually showing some explosiveness. So Sony, from my understanding, it's not this year-long injury. So once he gets back, I just think we have a 4-headed RB mess instead of a 3-headed mess. And obviously, once we have Cam there in future weeks, he's going to be stealing the goal line touches. So you know what? You can do worse than someone getting 10 to 20 rush attempts on one of the league's better offenses. Again, once Cam is back in the picture. But normally, man, I think this, general week as a whole, we don't have that Mike Davis, that Justin Jefferson, that real high-end waiver wire guy you should be trying to break the bank for. Damien Harris, good player. Again, not a bad flyer, but not someone I'm going to, put any sort of significant percentage of fab for.
Yeah, it's good to see him get his chance and do well with it. I got out of this that when beat writers like Mike Reese are saying the team's excited about him, they want to see what he can do, believe them. Mike Reese is not a hype meister, so Harris was going to get a shot. I think even if Michel's healthy, and this is a fertile backfield for fantasy value, but as you said, if it's a 4-way backfield, it was good to see James White out there catching passes last night. And Cam Newton, some weeks he'll get 3 touchdowns, some weeks the running backs will get 3 touchdowns. But as you said, I think you set up the week in waiver wire well when you said, yeah, this week, not. I mean, Robert Tonyan, right? Well, do we at least make an exception for Big Bob Tonyan when it comes to waiver wire excitement?
Man, it's been like, I remember the whole offseason with Alan Lazard. Like half the stuff with Lazard was like, okay, look at his stats in these big games, and the other half was Rodgers invited him over to Thanksgiving dinner. They have lockers next to each other, like all these personal things. And hey, man, Rodgers loves Robert Tonyan, so if Rodgers loves the guy, we should be loving him too. I wasn't probably on him as much as I should have been this last week. I mean, okay, I had him in the showdown lineups and all that, but just in terms of expecting him to really go off and get these 3 touchdowns, like come on, Devontae Adams has never done that. But hey, It's in Robert Tonyan's range of outcomes now. We know this, and we need to adjust accordingly. So still going to be an issue when Adams gets back with overall target share. He's going to be a number 3, number 4 option more weeks than not. But, tight end position, as kind of happens every year, seems like. In August, we're talking about how deep tight end is and how long you can wait. But by the time week 4 or 5 comes rolling around, we're usually, scrapping out the position again. So, again, I'm not going to blow it on Tonyan. I still think there's a lot of tight ends out there you can, get as 1-week flyers. But he's going to be in that tight end 1 conversation here every week moving forward.
And it's that narrative belongs in fantasy football, right? What you brought up, I'm glad you brought up the idea of offseason news about the relationship between Rodgers and Lazard, Rodgers and Tonyan working out with George Kittle. I mean, hey, hang out with guys that know how to get it done if you want to figure out how to get it done. So like you said, the bar's so low at tight end. I think Tonyan is above the bar of tight end 1 right now, even when Adams comes back, maybe even when Lazard comes back, if he's going to continue to have this red zone role. But it's more like Aaron Rodgers, everything he's touching is turning gold. And that's one of the, and Ian, I'm not even really sure how to attack this topic, but when I'm weighing out waiver wire moves, advice, or people are asking who to start, who to bench, or trade advice and things like that, it just seems like there are certain offenses that are golden this year. That it's a alignment, I would say, alignment between quarterback play, philosophy, buy-in. Green Bay is certainly one of them. I think Dallas is one of them. I think Buffalo, Seattle. Like if we could go back, I think best ball contest. If you were enjoying Buffalo Bills passing game plays, you're probably up near the top of those best ball standings. Are you finding yourself stratifying offenses at this point, or otherwise looking at players differently because of the offense they play in?
Yeah, I know. Roto World's Josh Norris always says this and cracks me up, where he's like, fantasy football doesn't have to be hard. You just pick the good players from the good offenses. I mean, that's all it comes down to. So yeah, I mean, I agree with those four you named, and I think even the Baltimore Ravens, and the Kansas City Chiefs, obviously, we're going to see high performances more weeks than not. But yeah, and honestly, again, like we're just talking about Robert Tonyan, like it's not normally. Obviously, we want the top running back or the top, one or two wide receivers, but in these cases, and these top 5 scoring offenses, we can take, more chances on the auxiliary options, on the complementary pieces like your Robert Tonyan. And, I think that's why we do need to take a step back a little bit. I know a lot of people are worried about Michael Gallup and, worrying about that.
Right.
And hey, he's still the number 3 at worst wide receiver in this passing offense that's on pace for over 800 attempts. I mean, I really don't think Dalton Schultz is going to have more targets than Gallup when the whole season's said and done. Everyone's balling out there right now. I think Gallup's going to have his day. And the other two offenses, I mean, Seahawks are just unique because, yeah, they definitely are one of these golden offenses. But for the target share to be as condensed as it is around Lockett, around Metcalf, I mean, that's the top 2 in the passing game. Usually, like in Minnesota, like, okay, we kind of can deal with the top 2 condensed passing game in a run-first offense. Now the Seahawks are pass-first, and we got the condensed top 2. So that's been a super big moneymaker in DFS over these last few weeks. And then finally with the Bills, kind of odd man out, but just want to give a quick shout out to him. Devin Singletary, man, he's playing some great ball this season. Right now, him and Josh Jacobs tied with the league high 22 missed forced tackles through these 4 weeks. I know fantasy people kind of stick their noses up at the broken tackle stats, but you know what, man? It's one-on-one. It's one of the best measures I think of what really is out there on the film. I mean, when I'm watching these games over, I'm always making notes to myself of stats to look up afterwards that hopefully match what I'm seeing on the film. And Devin Singletary, when the guy's making every single first defender miss, it seems like every single week now, makes sense that he's up there.
It does, even if it's not translating yet. And since you mentioned that stat, let's take a step back. It's the couch, so we're going to go from tangent to tangents off a tangent, back to the main line if we can ever find it again. You were doing great work at Roto World. You joined on at PFF this year, and I think PFF is an acronym that you don't have to even explain further than that. It's got great visibility. But how has it changed your fantasy analysis? How has it changed your approach to your work now that you're under the PFF umbrella?
Yeah, it's been just a whole lot more opportunity. I mean, PFF Ultimate, for those that don't know, you can literally figure out, over the last 10 years, quarterbacks on 3rd and 6, facing pressure, throwing the left side of the field, all these kind of stats that we kind of mock PFF for. But you can get legit new cool things about that. So I'm still trying to wrap my mind around, what is now available out there and what I can measure, what to do moving forward. But the biggest thing for me is just an increase in time. And that's why I kind of made the decision to begin with. I mean, look, a big part of Roto World and other companies is news, and people like Roto Pat. I mean, love my guy John Daigle. Amazing people at it, and it is truly a grind, man. For those that have never been there, doing that news, staring at that tweet deck for every second of your shift and just responding ASAP. It's not easy, and it's very hard, and it was extremely difficult to try to do everything I want to do from a content perspective with that. So really, not having news now has allowed me to just pay that much more closer attention to all the games, and then be able to do every bit of article and podcast content I could want. So still staying plenty busy, but it's been nice not having to multitask as much. And again, having the PFF tools on the other side of things, it's all been good, brother.
Has there been anything, like, since you've had access to the treasure trove of PFF data, if I say something that surprised you or something that went counter to what you expected to find or something that just changed the way you thought about a player or a team or even watching football, is there anything that comes to mind since you've had access to all that data?
Yeah, a couple guys actually. I'm sure we're going to talk about anyway. But some of these players, like, okay, we have Jonathan Taylor and J.K. Dobbins right now. A lot of people drafted these running backs high, and we've seen highlights and their college stuff, and they're great players, and their teams love them, and they're going to likely, in my opinion, have very good NFL careers. But don't be so quick to write off guys like Jordan Wilkins, Gus Edwards, just because they're keeping your fantasy studs on the bench. These guys are playing great football, man. Gus Edwards is number 1 running back in the league right now in yards after contact per rush attempts. Jordan Wilkins is number 1 in missed forced tackles per rush attempts. So, it's just a situation where I think in general we tend to overhype rookies just because we spend February through the end of April. Unless you're just grinding the XFL and AAF like me, you're spending all this time on these rookies.
No Korean baseballing you?
Right. Not this year. We'll see about next. But, we spend all this time on the rookies. I understand why we overhype them. But, now we're seeing with the Chargers and Justin Jackson versus Joshua Kelly. Like, don't be so quick to, dismiss these incumbent backups and, having, again, these, kind of just these stats that go a little bit beyond the box score that PFF does have in their depths, like, the broken tackles and the yards after contact stats, I think has helped me, not overreact as much to some of the public swaying the rookie hype in some of these situations.
Yeah, it's another disappointing year for rookie running backs. And there's like 4 different things I want to talk about all at once. Like they're all rushing into my head at once because all kinds of topics intersect at the players you brought up and the points you brought up. But first, let's give Edwards and Wilkins their own treatment because these are both players that each week, Ian, I'm finding a room on another roster to put them there. On the bench, not trusting them yet, but I look at it, I think the analogy I always use is like the powder in the flame. In this case, the powder is Indianapolis is going to run the ball a ton. Baltimore is going to run the ball a lot, even though they split up the backfield and Lamar Jackson gets his, but also they're going to be highly efficient. Colts haven't been as efficient yet, maybe a little vanilla in the running game, but the opportunity is going to be there. So we know there's opportunity in terms of volume in Indy and in terms of efficiency in Baltimore. And then we're looking for talent. That's the flame. And Gus Edwards, undrafted free agent, I don't care. Every year he seems to have a little more burst, a little more kinetic energy, a little tougher to bring down. And now he looks like the guy that should be getting the majority of the carries. J.K. Dobbins still there, waiting in the wings. Someone brought up the Ray Rice treatment. Maybe the Dobbins, they're just bite size, putting stuff on his plate. Like you said, don't buy too much into the rookie hype yet. Last year was also a terrible year for rookie running backs. And then you even see Darrell Henderson with a little delayed impact. Wilkins, again, I was a late round pick, or I always get mixed up whether he went undrafted or Justin Jackson. I think Jackson was a 7th round pick. Anyway, the point is not highly regarded, even though he played really good football in the SEC. A really excellent technical runner. I mean, maybe he's getting yards that Jonathan Taylor isn't getting right now with his overall abilities. And the team, as you said, actually holds him in high regard. I think that Edwards can have value without an injury in Baltimore, although Mark Ingram's got that veteran deference, to Wilkins, it's a little tougher. You might need to see a Taylor injury for Wilkins to have value. But if Taylor were to get hurt, I'm a lot more excited about Wilkins than I am about, either Chargers back or what have you. So I think you're right to draw attention to those guys. And then those stats, I think, are excellent. See, I think the advanced metrics, Ian, are good for asking questions, but not necessarily answering the questions in the sense that they can verify things that you were wondering. It sure looks like Gus Edwards is getting more yards after contact than anybody else, and you verify it. And with Wilkins and his forced missed tackles, I think that's a great way to circle all the way back to Singletary. So, I think this fits into a larger discussion too of how we use our bench spots in fantasy leagues, because we talked about these offenses. Like, I'm still saying Cedric Wilson, his 1 week wonder, is also an indicator of potential lasting value if anybody goes down in the Dallas offense. Likewise with David Moore. Gabriel Davis probably thrown back to the waiver wire, but keep him on waiver wire speed dial because of the quality of the offenses. Even Marquez Valdez-Scantling, you might be tempted to hold through the bye just because of how well Aaron Rodgers is playing. So I see all these different things intersecting here with these players. And then we get to the rookies, maybe the most interesting point, right? But there may still be some value from the post-hype rookie bounce. First guy that comes up, Keyshawn Vaughan. You interested? You poking around there going into a Thursday night game?
I was a little more interested before we found out that Leonard Fournette does seem to have at least a game time decision chance. And if he's not going to play this week, it sounds like he's at least healthy enough to be back sooner rather than later. So I mean, again, before I had watched any film other than just casual college football watching on these running backs, I mean, just looking at the situations after the draft, I thought Vaughn had almost the second best spot behind Clyde Edwards-Helaire, just in terms of if everything goes best case, who can rise up their team's depth chart the easiest. And okay, we got Cam Akers there too, Jonathan Taylor, but just before they added Fournette, I mean, nobody in Tampa that you're really worried about. And so now LaShawn McCoy's hurt as well, in addition to Fournette. So that could be the tricky one. Ronald Jones, I mean, he had the 8 or 9 targets last week or whatever, dropped 2 or 3 of them. It's not good. Despite Ronald Jones' just amazing routes we saw in the summer against those high school kids they dragged out to the practice field, just not quite seeing the production from him as a receiver this year. Guy looks great running, though.
Yeah.
I mean, credit to Ronald. He had some really good runs last week. So I don't think Vaughn's going to take over this situation or anything. But hey, right now the Buccaneers are number 2 in the league in targets to the running back position. If Vaughn's able to take that role from Shady, I don't think, I love seeing LaShawn McCoy once or twice a week hold the ball like a loaf of bread. Gives me a little flashback, but definitely do think it's a opportunity for Vaughn to take that role. And then on the other side of things, other guys I would mention real quick. Antonio Gibson, he's looking great now. I thought the breakout could be coming in week 3. He played over 60% of snaps in week 2. Didn't go that way, but last week against the Ravens, man, it's clear at this point that behind Terry McLaurin, they need to get Gibson the ball next. And just looking at this offense, I mean, for me at least, before the season started, I thought, okay, Gibson, he's gonna ideally get that pony scat back role, and Peyton Barber, Bryce Love will be soaking out the early stuff. He has the early down stuff.
Yeah.
Now we're just waiting for McKissick to hit the bench. And, look, I hate when we compare rookies to these all pros, great players, but when the coach does it, we got to pay attention a little bit.
Right.
Ron Rivera is the one that said, he could see a Christian McCaffrey-esque role for Antonio Gibson. Forget his exact roles, but he did say the 2 players' names in the same sentence. So, definitely if he's still out there somehow, scoop up Gibson. And last guy I'd point out, DeAndre Swift, man. It hasn't gone well for him, but going in this bye week, look, Adrian Peterson came out of nowhere and became the lead guy in this backfield. It tells you that, okay, we don't know what's going on. It wouldn't be shocking if he just kind of phased out eventually too. I mean, Swift, as much as he didn't play at all in week 3, we saw him get going in week 4. He's still a guy they drafted in the second round. It's not like they're going to leave him on the bench the whole year. Decent flyer, a guy you're getting at the absolute floor of his cost right now. So yeah, I mean, I think Vaughn over Swift, definitely. But if you got the deep enough bench, man, wouldn't be shocked if we see, truly a change in committee type in Detroit following this bye.
It's interesting too because we're talking about split backfields, right?
Yeah.
Tampa maybe on Gibson really quick. I think Gibson is just if I take anything out of that, Ian, which I would agree with, is be willing to overpay for him. Be willing to pay above what his market value is right now because the sky's the limit. And Gibson was an interesting referendum on pure talent. Because everyone's got models, everyone's got their formula for success, and some of them hit the big reject on him because he only had 77 touches in college. And there's a real concern there, brain mapping, right? Like more reps equals more brain mapping to understand what to do, and the game just speeds up in the NFL. And at first, Gibson did look a little overwhelmed, although also you could see he had overwhelming physical ability that he could bring to bear on the field in a way that, say, Chris, I don't know how old you are, Ian, like Chris Henry, not Chris Henry, the Bengals receiver, rest in peace, but Chris Henry, the Titans running back before Chris Johnson, where, it isn't just about, Kalen Ballage is a good example. He's the modern Chris Henry, right? You can have all of the measurables, all of the physical ability, but your brain just doesn't understand how to turn it into anything on the football field. But Gibson has that, and the breakout's coming. Tampa's interesting. So let me ask you this, because I look at these split backfields, Ian. Like last year, for instance, I mean, the Tampa passing game was like a rigged slot machine. Just every week, pull the arm, and out comes the coins. But still, they did nothing in the running game. Now, some of that's Peyton Barber, who you mentioned. It's all connected, right? Some of that's Ronald Jones, who's better as a runner, still brutal as a receiver. But is Tampa... I'm thinking of mechanical bulls. I have never actually rode a mechanical bull before.
They're tough, man.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of afraid that I would. I mean, now I'm to the age like I don't know. I get fall and I can't get up. Right. I'm thinking of like Urban Cowboy and Gillies and and I used to have an awesome Gilly shirt back in the day that shopping at thrift stores was still cool. A
That's not cool
mechanical
anymore.
what?
That's not cool anymore.
It should still be cool, right? I mean, that's what we should really do. See, because I would be happy right now to do a whole show on the finer points of finding cool stuff at thrift stores.
Thrifting, hell yeah.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. And I feel like, back in the 90s, I remember my dad saying, "What, are you just going to wear clothes from Salvation Army to your job?" I'm like, "Ha, Dad, guess what? I did it." This one actually, I had the Ghostbuster shirt on the other day. My point is this. I think of a mechanical bull, Ian, because like these split backfields, like Darrell Henderson, right? Like you can be on and be like, "All right, I'm on it. I got the Darrell Henderson big game." And then the next week, he throws you off on your ass and you're deciding whether to get back on. Is Tampa going to still be like that, or has Tom Brady settled this down in some way so that we're not going to have that remorse of trusting any Tampa back? Because as you said, Leonard Fournette's going to make this a three-headed backfield again soon.
No, I think it's a situation where it's going to look like it almost did in 2019. I mean, with Dari, Peyton Barber, who is now just Leonard Fournette, and then Ronald Jones still being Ronald Jones. And, whether or not Dari is going to be, 2019 Dari, if it's going to be 2020 Shady still or 2020 Keyshawn Vaughan remains to be seen, but still three backs. We don't have as many workhorse backs like in the league period these days. I mean, last week, Jerick McKinnon randomly was the only back to play over 90% of the snap. Particularly with Christian McCaffrey and Saquon Barkley sideline, there's just not those true three down just workhorses that I think we saw a lot more in the earlier 2000s, and obviously well before then. But it's still a situation where 3 or 4 back committees, that's where we run the problem. We can live with 2 back committees. That's fine. We can, especially when one of the guys got the pass down work, that's all fine and good. But it's when we get really messy with 3 backs, and not only 3 backs, but man, you look at those final snap counts from the 2019 Bucks. It was literally about 33%, 33%, 33%. So I do think that's the scenario we're trending more and more towards. Again, maybe if Fournette and Shady are out this week, now we got Rojo and Keyshawn, so we can take advantage of that in this 1 week sample size. But yes, moving forward, I think as these guys get healthier, it's unfortunately not going to be all that fantasy friendly.
Yeah. And Detroit, you have that 3-headed backfield plus Matt Patricia, plus Detroit just has this feeling, Ian, sometimes when you choose a player from a certain team, you just get this feeling in your stomach, like, why am I trusting this team? Why am I, and that's kind of how the Lions feel this year. And for Swift, I begrudgingly put him in my waiver column just beneath, Damien Harris, even though he probably has a higher long-term ceiling, long-term being the rest of the season than Harris, because they're giving him more run. He's been relevant twice this year already. He's clearly got the most juice of any of the running backs on the roster, but we still have to trust Detroit to do things the right way. And I mean, that's the problem. I love that you mentioned McKinnon got 90+% of the snaps too, because that's like the last guy. Like 6 months ago, you'd say, rank the running backs in likelihood of getting 90+% snaps in a game. You say, well, not McKinnon. I mean, my God, if he stays on the field, that's the last thing you want to do. But that's great. It's great to see the confidence in him. I would love seeing Raheem Mostert back out there for sure. On the Rams, real quick, is Sean McVay like overthinking all this? I mean, is Sean McVay turning from a coach that we liked his cooking, we liked him to make more out of what he had than what he started with, and now he's making less out of it, or otherwise being frustrating as far as fantasy football is concerned?
I feel like he's almost making more out of it than ever, because this offensive line really still isn't anything resembling what we saw in, the 2017, 2018 glory years. Jared Goff, still he's like I don't want to throw him too much under the bus, but he's in that Jimmy Garoppolo, Derek Carr mold where the second the play starts to break down, the play is over, save for 1 or 2 highlights over the course of a season. But McVay is doing what his offense needs right now, and that is limiting the amount of those type of off-script opportunities that Goff is exposed to. And they're, getting physical, smarter people than myself that really understand the intricacies of, rushing schemes and stuff. I pointed out too that, the Rams used to just be a lot more one-dimensional in their one game, and he's really expanded on that this year. So it sounds to me like McVay, is actually doing a really good job with a bounce back year, because we need to see that after, kind of the second half of 2019, everything fell apart. Unfortunately, it's just the worst case scenario we could imagine for fantasy football, because McVay all summer, hell, he said they had 4 running backs they trusted. Obviously, Kelly's out of the picture, but with, these three guys, Cam Akers coming back. McVay's really been honest the whole time. He said, we have three good backs we feel good about, and, we're going to keep using them in rotation. It sucked last week. I mean, Malcolm Brown made this one-handed catch for like a, ho-hum 6-yard first down, and I just was watching that going, oh, crap, this is going to be a Malcolm Brown game, isn't it? So, and Brown isn't bad by any stretch of the imagination, but the way Henderson played those last 2 weeks, you really thought it was maybe an opportunity for him to take over. Certainly not looking that way now, but I think, just a bigger takeaway is just the drop off in his passing game. 2018, 35 pass attempts per game, 2019, 39 attempts, and 2020 down to only 30.5. I mean, even that Bills game where they were down multiple touchdowns, you still see Goff only finishing in the low 30s in pass attempts. So, some guys like Kirk Cousins, where Cousins isn't throwing much, but he's got a league high 25% deep ball rate. So we can live with that when it's condensed around two wide receivers. Rams are condensed around two wide receivers, but Goff is at 5.7% deep ball rate right now. Breeze is at 5.4%, but we're not making fun of Goff the same way. It's part of the scheme. I get it. But, it's just concerning for, I think the ceilings, particularly of Woods and Kupp, because it was a condensed enough offense that, both of them flirting at wide receiver one value seem well within reach. They're still going to be fine this year, but I think they're more floor plays than, high ceiling options like we might have seen in 2019.
Yeah. When you score 17 points against the Giants, I think floor play.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just where we're at. I mean, the Bears scored 17 points against the Giants. So the Rams maybe not as prolific. And interesting to contrast how the Rams did whatever they wanted against the Eagles defense. And, of course, San Francisco had their backup quarterbacks in. Anyway, that's the fun thing about this going like week to week. Like you said, maybe you're not staring at the news as much, so you get to watch more and get more into that flow. Everything continues to redefine what we've seen before and set our expectations for what we expect going forward. One more post-hype rookie I just want to throw out there, or this is more like, because Ian, I think when you and I interact on Twitter, and I see one of the things I like is you're willing in a playful way to put hot takes out there, but you're not a hot take meister. It's just a way to share what's on your mind as you're reviewing things and things are coming into your head and you're willing to see things that haven't happened yet. I mean, you're willing to see, hey, this is an arrow pointing at something else that might be happening, as opposed to just, well, I'm not going to accept this until I see so much overwhelming evidence and then I'll agree with it. We're looking for that leading evidence pointing to something. That's how you can be successful in fantasy football, as opposed to being too slow. I see arrows pointing at DJ Dallas. I shouldn't even call him a post-hype rookie because there was never DJ Dallas. Well, there was some hype. They liked him. But coming into the season, and it was a little bit of a surprise that Travis Homer was clearly ahead of him coming into the season after all of the positive buzz around DJ Dallas. I think if you go back and watch last week, Dallas looks like he's got more to offer than Homer as they both return to Miami. And you've got two running backs ahead of DJ Dallas on the injury list. I mean, Carlos Hyde, he's already wearing the non-contact jersey in practice. That ain't good. Not when you run the way that Carlos Hyde does.
Exactly.
And then Chris Carson, who I love Chris Carson, and his injuries haven't really been his fault. It's not like he's injury prone, but he just runs without any regard for his own health. I mean, that's what's great about him, but it also means that the clock is ticking. Do you have any thoughts on DJ?
Yeah, it was one of those things where, he got the ball last week and it was, who was that for a second? And because we just haven't seen him this year, but he looked good out there. And I agree with you. I mean, going in this year, he was a kind of a sneaky guy to potentially take over the backfield, but Carson coming off of the hip injury, Penny still, on IR, and Carlos Hyde just being Carlos Hyde. So I'm with you on that. When you are a bruiser and same thing happened with Jordan Howard and that shoulder injury last year. Like if it's a shoulder or a rib and you're this running back that kind of makes your living on, picking up yards after contact, being that early down guy, it's concerning. You're not going to be able to do that as much. So I think you nailed it. Travis Homer, they seem to like him. I think he's going to remain a little more involved than we would hope for. But yeah, man, I mean, DJ Dallas, we're not going to see him any cheaper than he is right now because he's free right now. So taking a shot on it. And yeah, Chris Carson, I mean, over his last 2 weeks, I saw someone joke about it on Twitter where they were like, Carson has torn his ACL and got concussed in the last 2 weeks, and he's still out there picking up yards. So, the guy is willing to go flip over dudes and land on his feet. I mean, he's so fun to watch, but yeah, obviously, doesn't quite have the type of running style that we see lead to a bunch of longevity. So yeah, man, I mean, look, DJ Dallas is one injury away from being at the top of everyone's waiver wire claims. So as you said, if we want to try to get ahead of these things by a couple weeks, go for it.
Yeah, that's why I like that Gus Edwards call too. But for me, it's just confirmation bias. It's confirmation bias, Ian. Whenever I see you put something out there, like, yeah, absolutely. All right, let's circle back around to a couple of things that are on everyone's mind. Speaking of taking a shot, what's our diagnosis of the Chargers' backfield without Austin Eckler?
I think it's going to be a two-back committee, probably. I got to do a little more. I looked today, and I didn't see that they had added a third back, but, wouldn't be shocked if they try to bring in someone to shave off some pass down work. But I think it's going to be pretty split between Joshua Kelly and Justin Jackson. Look, I actually think Kelly has looked better on film from what I've seen than his kind of advanced metrics indicate. He's only 28th among 43 guys in yards after contact per rush, 36th in percentage of carries to go for a first down or touchdown. But he's definitely hasn't been someone that I think has just run away with this job. I understand he played more snaps than Jackson last week after Eckler left the game, but this guy's also lost fumbles in back-to-back weeks. Yeah. I mean, we saw what happened to Carson last year. 3 games, 3 straight fumbles. Like, you're going to get benched. I think most coaching staffs are going to follow kind of that principle. It's hard to really blame him at this point. So with Kelly, he's a good guy to have in your squad, but I just think, if he's available in as a free agent in your league, he's going for far more than Justin Jackson. I just think that disparity really isn't deserved because like Edwards, like Wilkins, Justin Jackson's good. I mean, I know yards per carry isn't, the stat we like to throw around, but career 5.1 yards per carry, and we want to go more advanced. He was 5th in forced missed tackles per attempt last year, and the only guys with more yards after contact per rush, Josh Jacobs, Darius Geis, Tony Pollard, and Derrick Henry. So Jackson's been in the system. They trust him. He just got hurt in week 1. It's not like he lost his job to Joshua Kelly. He just got hurt and couldn't play. Now he's back. I think it's going to be more or less 50-50, maybe Kelly 60-40, but I know, Kelly is one fumble away from hitting the bench. Jackson is not.
Exactly. The Kelly fumbles are an important part of this picture, and you've laid out the case very well. Justin Jackson is hashtag good at football. I mean, he's a good runner. He and Jordan Wilkins are both guys that, even though they've just been used sparingly over the last couple of years, when you watch them, you say, that's good. Now, they don't have first, second round physical talent. And I'm reminded of my buddy Ryan Riddle, at one time all-time sack leader for Cal, played for the Jets and the Raiders, who said,
Ooh.
he said, I always like to give him his props, because if you look up Ryan's story, he's a wonderful human being. He's just a sweet, sweet guy. And he wrote some incredible pieces for Bleacher Report back in the day about what it's really like being in the NFL, which we're still peeking through keyholes. We have no idea. I mean, that's part of the reason that we can be so like jocular about it, right?
True.
I mean, it's just, like when we're like, oh, this guy like Malcolm Brown, who's a fantastic player as far as what he's done with his NFL career, is just an obstacle to our fantasy analysis. Yeah. Anyway, Ryan would say that, early round picks have to prove they can't play. Late round picks have to prove that they can. And they've proven that they can, but Justin Jackson hasn't proven he can stay healthy. I agree with you that it's basically close enough to 50-50 that Kelly's value is almost unchanged, to be honest. And you saw the right side of the offensive line, and let's give our props to the Bucs run defense. We get to watch them against David Montgomery. Ready for some more Dave Montgomery, 1.5 yards per carry?
Hey, he's playing better this year.
He is. No, I even went out and traded James Conner for him in a dynasty league because Conner, I think, his value might go off a cliff as he goes into free agency, whereas Dave Montgomery is going to get 2 more years to try to take over this backfield, and he's showing more burst, and he is improving. I'm not sure. He had a lot way to go with his burst, not very impressive, and being indecisive. It's like that's a terrible terrible combination in the NFL. You either got to have that burst, or you have to be very decisive, and he didn't have both of them. Anyway, my point is this: Chargers backfield, not much there. I think Eckler, what they got a week 10 bye, so you got like 5-6 weeks. I wouldn't. If anything, I'd be trying to trade Joshua Kelly. If I could go to the Eckler team, if I had Kelly, and see what they give up for him. Although Justin Herbert's really exciting. And by the way, I'm going to say this on every show this week. Like, all the listeners of the Audible are going to get tired of hearing me say, when you're watching Justin Herbert throwing long touchdowns to Tyron Johnson and Jalen Guyton. By the way, it was Darius Bradwell and good old Tremaine Pope on the practice squad for the Chargers. You mentioned Chargers might sign another back. Those are a couple names on the roster. When you see Justin Herbert uncorking those balls, well, first you should think of Pep Hamilton, who's an excellent quarterback coach, who I think is partially responsible for what we're seeing from Herbert. But you should be thinking of Mike Williams. Oh, boy. Yeah. Just get that hamstring healthy. We're going to talk about cooking.
Could that dude just learn how to brace his falls, man? I feel like no one else. Like every time Mike Williams makes another spectacular contested catch, he falls like a freaking sack of bricks.
Right. It's terrible. I mean, it's great. And again, it's so funny because the very qualities that make players able to fulfill our dreams are also the ones that turn into nightmares.
Yeah.
Because if he didn't play at that edge, well, that's the whole thing about football, right, Ian? Because you have, as it is, human beings that are pushing their bodies to the absolute limits of what's possible. And against other human beings that are doing that. But then you're trying to do things that are at the absolute limit of what's possible on the field. So you're always on that razor's edge, and it's
That's
players.
Why sport's awesome, man.
Yeah, it is. Well, it is. I mean, it's why it is awesome, because in a way that no other sport. I mean, I don't know. You know, there's been some great boxing matches over the years where the boxers are really pushing themselves. Because for me, I'm going to skip right to the off the rail stuff, because I always come back. I've been asking people a lot lately, like, what was the moment that made you fall in love with football or fall in love with sports? And my earliest really vivid memory of football, Ian, is Kellen Winslow and the game, the Chargers-Dolphins game, you know, the double overtime game, hook and ladder and everything. And like, really, he looked like, you know, somebody that was near death, as he's basically being like just hanging himself on two people to get off the field. But he had done these ultimate heroic acts. So with Mike Williams, it's that he goes up for the ball. It's like we're talking about with Chris Carson. He goes up for the ball like he has absolutely no regard for his body when he comes down. He's like a frisbee catching dog. I mean, I'm going to get that ball. But it sets himself up for these terrible collisions with the ground. Either way, I'm excited. I'm excited to see him with Justin Herbert. Okay, Cleveland. Nick Chubb. I hate that, man. I just mean it makes watching football less fun. But if you can game this waiver wire move right, is the right move D'Ernest Johnson, or is the right move let somebody else take him?
I think let someone else take him, man. You know, we were talking about this on Twitter a little bit. Like, okay, if you're just in a league with no fab and you're just next up in the waiver wire order and you just want to add, you know, a running back that could potentially have some standalone value if Kareem Hunt isn't 100% moving forward, okay, but please don't, you know, treat him like Mike Davis or one of these guys moving forward. So here's my only issue with D'Ernest Johnson. You know, this, for me, it's similar like the last week where Tariq Cohen got hurt. You know, I'm the self-proclaimed president of the Cordero Patterson fan club. I would have loved to say that Patterson is going to take that Tariq Cohen role. No, you know, I can put that stuff aside. I was pretty confident Montgomery was going to get this featured workload. Same thing here, man. I watched every single snap of every AAF game. I love that league. I know all about D'Ernest Johnson. I would love to anoint this guy as the next big thing. That's not the case. I mean, look, let's say Kareem Hunt's healthy enough to be playing right now. We know that. So Hunt's getting the pass down work, and he is great this year, by the way. Number 3 in elusive rating. He was number 3 last year, number 7 with the Chiefs. Like, he's playing better than ever, arguably. But the problem with D'Ernest Johnson is he's not getting the pass down work. That's going to be Hunt and maybe even Hilliard, who was out there almost as often as D'Ernest last week. So we're looking at a best case scenario of, you know, a 60-40, 70-30 split with Hunt as the lead guy and Johnson just kind of getting this not so fantasy friendly rush attempt work. I don't even know if he's going to get that over Hilliard. They were switching the guys back and forth, different coaching staff last year, but you know, that was never a cemented position last year. And I just think a situation where we saw the Cowboys just awful defense, not be able to contain anyone. Sig, if you were out there, you might have been able to average 3 yards per carry. I don't know. I mean, it was just that bad of a game for him. So I just think that even let's say Hunt, the groin injury just flares up and he misses the game. I don't know if I'm still ranking D'Ernest inside the top 24 backs. I think it's going to be a 2, if not 3 back committee. And, you know, you mentioned before about, you know, bench strategy. I want guys where if an injury happens, we are locking them in as high upside options. And I just don't think that D'Ernest Johnson has top 20, you know, RB value in his range of outcomes, even with like multiple more injuries, honestly.
Yeah, I think the cold water, the wet blanket, on whatever optimism. And look, I had Johnson as like a 7 to 15% of your fab bucks guy, which is just like, hey, you know, he isn't just someone, like you said, he isn't just someone to just leave sitting there if you have to let go of Randall Cobb for him or something. But at the same time, you're not hot and heavy for him. But you did bring up, at least I'm glad that Kareem Hunt did come into last week hurt. It's the same reason I'm looking at DJ Dallas. You know, I mean, some of the events that lead the domino effect to take place of Johnson having startable fantasy value have already taken place. Chubb going down, Hunt's hurt. The Cleveland running game looks fantastic.
Yeah.
I think it was Benjamin Solak. I love Ben's work. Pointed out that it's not just the zone system Stefanski's putting in power pulling guards, and it's this running game. And is it the running game? Is it there's more there to Johnson than we thought? Is it just the Dallas defense is that bad? By the way, the test of that, see, this ties in. It's beautiful how all this stuff ties together. I think that when we're swimming around in the ocean of this stuff every week, Ian, it's impossible to see anything independent. Everything is connected to everything in the NFL, right? The Giants. So here's your contrarian take, right? Because the Giants have been horrible. They've also faced a really tough schedule. 5 of their next 6 games, they face teams in their division. 5 of their next 6. Is there anything that we're looking for here? Are you picking around the corpse of this team to get some fantasy value?
So I was writing my QB rankings article on a Monday. I do it every Monday. And I think when I started the article, I had Daniel Jones around QB 13. And by the end of it, I had him QB 21 because I just kept finding other guys I would rather start. He has not thrown a touchdown since week 1. They have not scored more than 16 points. Everything that we use to identify smart offenses, pre-snap motion,
right.
Pace, play action rate. These are all things that the Giants could be doing. Maybe they will change over time and do, but they are not doing right now. I mean, literally, man, over these last 3 weeks, the only positives I've seen from this offense, one Wayne Gallman run. When Daniel Jones does decide to run, he usually does some good things. That guy's got some athleticism. And there was this weird drive last week where the Rams just stopped guarding Devontae Freeman. So he picked up 3 or 4 straight catches for 40 yards. That's it, man. And I think Darius Slayton's talented, and Golden Tate, he's going to have better days too. Started off the season pretty banged up. And it's good to see Evan Ingram isn't hurt yet. But, I was more on Daniel Jones last year. Only Lamar Jackson had more 30 point fantasy points per game. That was the thing we kept going back to. So I was a little higher on him earlier in the offseason. And then, the GOAT, Evan Silva, talk a little sense into me and was just like, you know what? Jason Garrett's the guy calling plays there. I don't trust him and Joe Judge to anoint this guy. So, kind of like we've always said in the beginning, just trusting good offenses to get our fantasy players from. I really do think the Giants offense might be worse than the Cowboys defense is bad. So I am selling right now on this resurgence. I just think we're looking at an awful football team. Maybe we do get, one or two of the booms we saw from last season. And it is nice that's a little more condensed while Barkley and Shepard are on IR. But in general, I am still selling the Giants despite, the schedule softening up.
I like how you frame that. Who is worse? Quienes menos macho? My God, my wife speaks fluent Spanish. That's terrible. I should be able to do better than that. My point is this. You have the terrible Giants offense, the terrible Cowboys defense. Maybe in DFS, they're the Cowboys defense in. Alden Smith, the teeing off on Daniel Jones, who's oblivious in the pocket. Who knows? We'll see. An interesting test. Sometimes it just results in bad football, but I think that at least there'll be good football when Dak Prescott is on the field. And like that you bring up Jason Garrett. It's kind of like movies. There's the actors, actresses, but then there's the writers or directors. And if Jason Garrett is directing the movie, it's going to not be a good movie, probably.
That's very well put.
Yeah. That's one of those things that just gave you pause. But, also Saquon Barkley going out makes things a lot tougher for them. Sterling Shepard was the number 1. Moving right along. 2 more things before we get to off the rails. Bill O'Brien. There's a big story here anyway. Getting fired after week 4 is a big deal in the NFL. That doesn't usually happen. And everybody coming out to be like, let me tell you about how mean he was to me. Also a big deal. Just one of those things that you notice that stands out that Bill O'Brien maybe was not the nicest presence around the building. Does that give you any hope? Are you going in at all on the idea of the Texans having that weight lifted from them, and maybe this offense starting to look better, also coinciding with the schedule getting easier, although it hasn't got much easier than the Vikings defense this year?
Yeah, that's fair. But in their credit, Will Fuller comes down with that, catch that. I could still watch the replay. I'm not really sure if he caught it or not. He comes down with that. They get things going in overtime. Maybe they eke that one out. So surprisingly, man, despite this tough schedule to start the year and despite everything going on, despite losing Hopkins, Deshaun Watson's averaging career high 8.3 yards per attempt. I think he's the same guy, as good as ever. Even in that Steelers game, that first half in particular, he must have had 3 or 4 of those off-script plays where I know he takes a lot of unnecessary sacks, sacks, man. But, when you look at the options a quarterback really has when they're under pressure, it's like, okay, I can force the ball to someone who's not open. I can take a sack, or I can try to extend the play. And Deshaun Watson usually picks that latter option. And yeah, sometimes he then takes a sack he was probably going to take anyway. Other times he makes magic happen because the dude is a freaking monster of a quarterback. So I do think, this was kind of primed to happen anyway, because I just don't think we live in a world where Deshaun Watson is going to lead anything other than an above average offense more weeks than not. So, Jaguars, Titans, Packers, Jaguars again, Browns next. Those aren't all gimmies or anything, but it's certainly not, Chiefs, Ravens, Steelers like they had to deal with to start the season. So I think we were bound to see, some positive regression. All the receivers that people assume will get hurt are still healthy for now. I'm knocking on wood. Don't worry. David Johnson, it's, been a little bit up and down. Didn't look great last week. I thought he's shown some flashes though. Got my guy Duke Johnson back. I just think that, Deshaun Watson, when he's surrounded by, at a minimum, legit NFL players, he's going to have better weeks ahead.
I think there's a safe case to be made for that, although we need Will Fuller to stay healthy. David Johnson, sadly, I think is going to be wasted. I don't know. I mean, I'll be watching really closely as they face, like you said, Jacksonville, who we saw Cincinnati's offense, Joe Mixon, get right against them last week. And just based on what you hear, it does sound like the Texans players might have a little sigh of relief. And we'll see. Romeo Crennel, like grandpa, will be running the team basically. It might be kind of boring. And, it's not going to be the boldest team in the NFL with Crennel calling the shots. But hopefully it can get something better going around Deshaun Watson. The last thing I'll touch on, I made a big speech about this on our waiver wire show this morning, Ian. But really, going into the season, there was theoretical talk. Like, we're going into a season with a pandemic, and it might be different. It might be different for fantasy football. And in week 4, we got to experience just how different it is going to be. We had a whole different kind of calculus of decision making on Sunday. Some leagues had replacement players. You could say, if they don't play the game, these are the guys I want to count in place of my New England or KC players. Not every league had that. Sometimes you had to just make the decision. We had, limited data. That's what we do in fantasy football, though, right? We make decisions based on limited data. We act like we can predict the future, basically. But it changed your evaluation of what you had on your bench, right? Go ahead. How did it, or should it change how you manage your teams?
A little bit, but I think, the same kind of principles that you should be following in, quote unquote, normal years still apply. I mean, again, we want to envision the best case scenario. That's why I just don't really want Dearness Johnson, because again, we broke down his best case scenario. I don't think it's all that high. So, like every week, working on this today, I got finished up after this, but I do an article, taking stock of every backfield around the league. And, part of that article, even if it's just a line or two, I always look at that backup RB situation, because even last week, man, when Mixon was questionable with a chest injury and everyone's freaking out over Giovanni Bernard, I don't think Giovanni Bernard is walking into a 70, 80%, feature back role. I understand that happened in the past when Mixon and Jeremy Hill missed time, but different coaching staffs. And I think, they're keeping Travion Williams inactive for right now. And people go, oh, he's inactive. Yeah, he's not going to play. You don't think Gio's going to get it? We literally saw this just happen with the Giants, where what happened when Saquon got hurt? Deion Lewis's role did not change. Gallman came up and they signed Freeman. Like, they're, this whole offseason, the 4 guys, I was pushing were, and I was far from the only one pushing these guys, but
sure.
Latavius Murray, Chase Edmonds, Tony Pollard, and Alexander Mattison, because to me, those were the 4 backs that we could confidently feel like if their starter went down, they would step into that 3-down role. So, it's we get to these types of weeks in the year. I mean, last year was Ty Johnson. I mean, there's always these trap play running backs where, RB1 gets hurt. We look at the next guy up on some, depth chart that was probably put together by an intern to begin with. And then we assume that guy's to get the same role. And that just rarely happens. So again, trying to envision the best case scenario, avoid those trap plays that don't have a high ceiling to begin with. And I think you're going to be in a good spot. You mentioned Cedric Wilson. I would say Mecole Hardman is another wide receiver where, okay, they're not going to give you a standalone value, but what good is standalone value if it's only, 4 or 6 targets per week or 8 carries versus, none, because you don't want to start those guys anyway. So give me the guy that is 1 injury away from actually being an every week starter.
David Moore.
Yeah. Do you see that yak he had? That dude had a hell of a game.
David Moore's he's 7th rounder, so again, not highly regarded, but he's been making circus catches from Russell Wilson before they let Russ cook. And Russ trusts him. If Metcalf and Lockett aren't exactly known for durability, so he's one to follow away too. Okay, now we get to the fun part of the show, really, because Let's hang out. And by the way, Hartitz,
You
Ian
got it.
Hartitz. Folks, follow on Twitter. A great follow. Always enjoyable information, and just the enthusiasm, the passion, the enjoyment, the reactions in the moment to things. But where's the fork in the road, Ian? From your life as it was going to what led you here to basically become like a sports obsessive and share it with everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I've always loved football. I mean, when I was, I remember being brokenhearted when I was like 5. I think I was like 6 years old because I used to draw up plays, and then I figured out that
Wow.
there were 11 guys on each side, and I had been drawing up plays with only 10 guys. So I was pretty devastated when I found that out. But I've just always loved it, man. I was, a football nut, always reading, any football book I can get my hands on as a kid and even up till today. But I played, man, until college. I was never going, NFL or anything like that. But got a couple concussions back in the day, and I knew I wasn't going pro. So I decided to call it quits, after I got another one my sophomore year. But just all of a sudden had a bunch of spare time. And, I read just so many. All I did was read sports articles, and I got to a point where I'd just be reading articles and, kind of forming questions in my mind. And to me, they'd be relevant questions and the person wouldn't even address them. And I was thinking, okay, well, one, you didn't think to address it, which is a problem. Or two, you did think to address it and it didn't match your argument, which is a problem. So I don't know, man, I don't want to sound too cocky, but just got to the point where, I was a finance major and I just thought I could kind of do it better than the sports writers were doing it. So I just, emailed every single writer I could find pretty much and said, hey, I don't write right now, but I want to, and I'll happily do free research so you can write and make your job a little easier. So must have sent 100 of those things, and only one person took me up on it. Luckily, that was Jonathan Bales, who I am indebted to, and he is the freaking man. Awesome guy. Really, again, just got me my start, and I've just been trying to run with it ever since. Kept doing my thing in finance. Out of my first year out of college, I had a consulting job I just hated, and once I was doing bad at that, just really tried to throw myself really into the industry and pour my heart and soul into it, because I have been around enough in the quote unquote real world to know I just don't want to be there. I want to be here watching football, writing about football. And it's a hard gig to get, man. I mean, as well as I do. So, hey, if someone wants to, outwork me and go get it, hey, they're welcome to try, but I'm trying to hold on to it as long as possible.
No, it's great. And you do great work. And your story, it reminded me of Howard Cosell, because Howard Cosell was like just watching sports and thinking I could do better. He was a lawyer. I could do better. I'm in the much way that you're a failed financier, finance analyst. I'm a failed lawyer. Also, I love that too, by the way, because finance. I don't want to offend anybody that's listening. Okay, I mean, I know there are people listening right now that do work in finance and do great work in finance. It's a very lucrative profession. But it's part of that real world, because I share that with you. I look out the window at that real world and I just think, I don't want to be part of that. I want to stay in my happy place in my head. And yeah, football is a happy place in the sense that it's the puzzle, just constantly wrestling with it and seeing it. Matthew in the chat room had same question. What was your position when you played football?
Linebacker, man.
Oh, yeah.
All the real men play on defense. All these softies playing wide receiver and all this. Back in my day, we actually, banged them up a little bit. So
sure. Yeah. It's interesting since you had that perspective. Like, what's your perspective on, say, like letting kids like up to say 12 or 13-year-olds play tackle football and things like that? Because as you said, you've had some concussions, so you've been there, done that.
Yeah, I don't think kids need to be tackling really before even 7th, 8th grade in middle school. You can get more out of it. I think just flag football, 2-hand touch, or whatever. But I just think the benefits you gain from being a part of a team and having to be in the meritocracy environment where hard work wins. The best player wins. If someone's better than you, they're going to start over you. People want to try to make excuses. People want to talk a lot of smack. You get bullied. Well, when you're out there on the football field, whoever's the best guy is going to be the one making the plays and getting the opportunities. So I just think the life lessons far outweigh, a few bumps to the head. Maybe I'm talking out of my butt. I'm far from a doctor, and
that's the concussions talking. I'm just kidding.
Exactly. So, we'll see if I sing the same tune in a while. But no, I mean, as someone that has no kids right now, I don't plan on prohibiting that. I will say, though, if it doesn't need to be football, it can be any sport. I just think the lessons of being involved in a team environment are far too valuable to dismiss over, studies that it's so with anything, man, politics and medical studies. I don't know how many of these things you click on the head. And this is why I almost pay attention to none of this stuff, because you see a headline, you click on it, it links to some study, and you read the study, and there's the nuanced answer that usually describes why the headline is incorrect to begin with. So, I know there's, some troubling CTE data out there for concussions. I'm happy with the steps they have made to make the game safer. But I just think, look, there's danger in everything we do. And obviously we need to mitigate that danger as best as possible. But to me, the reward of being in a football environment and, the best moments of my life have been on the football field or even just in the backyard making plays. I'm trying to chase that, writing a good article and stuff, but nothing has reached that high to me than just, going out there and making a play under the lights. So I wouldn't give up those moments, even if it does, unfortunately result in, some lesser moments down the road.
Sure. Oh, Ian. The conversation we could have about choices I made when I was younger that may result in diminished brain function when I'm older, but were worth it. And I would do it all exactly the same. Absolutely. And I think that was all very well said. And absolutely, I mean, football, I think more than any other sport, reinforces this idea of being part of a team where you have to trust each other, and how the team goes can just come down to the weakest link. Everyone can do their job. I mean, watch the NFL on Sundays. I mean, sometimes this is why the coaches assignment football is like their catnip, and players that we see as less physically talented are on the bench. I think this might be part of what's holding Mecole Hardman back right now. I still love Hardman, still holding him, still a lot of hope for him. Just saying, because football really is that all for one for all mentality where no matter how good, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, even that, I think he had a goose egg on Monday night, but that Tyreek Hill touchdown, you see, it was out, paving the way for it.
Sure.
Marcus Robinson, the guy's still a great real life football player.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's why he's going to continue to play the role in the running game. If not football, it's totally fine to be like, if not football, I don't even want to think about that. If not football, though, what's something else that you're passionate about or otherwise occupies you?
Oh, I love the UFC, man. I mean, I actually, so I don't, no disrespect to you or any other analysts out there, but I really don't read or listen to other football content. I rely on, man. I mean, one of the things, I said Jonathan Bales, was kind of the guy that got in my come up, and he used to write these books, and they're still applicable to this day, but Fantasy Football for Smart People series. And, one of the points he made in that was, if you really want to be contrarian, one thing to do would be shut yourself off to outside news, just rely on your own opinions to move forward. And obviously to do that, you got to be watching every snap, looking at every metric, and trying to do due diligence there. But I do try to do that with football. There's only so many things you can do, man. I just know over the years, like I remember one big turning point for me was Rodgers got hurt like 3 years ago. Kaiser, I think it wasn't Kaiser. Brett Hundley came in, and everyone was split over it because it was kind of a dual threat guy. Should we play him in DFS or not? And I remember I watched every snap and came to my conclusion that no, we shouldn't. And I knew really smart people in the industry came to a different conclusion. And I really let that influence me. And I ended up being right in that scenario. I've been wrong plenty of times since. But, but after that, I said, okay, I'm not going to be able to learn here if I need to decipher what I thought and then what all these other people thought as well. I will be able to learn if I stick to my guns, and then I can, adjust, just as Bill Parcells said, reduce variables, improve performance. And I think if the more we can do that, the more it'll help. I kind of forget where we were going with all this. Sorry, got a little bit lost.
No, you started out on UFC. Is that you're passionate about?
Oh, yes, I love. Yeah, so yeah, don't like to look at a bunch of NFL content in my spare time. So UFC, man. I mean, unfortunately, the pandemic threw things off, but I went to, I think it was 5 or 6 fights last year. Before that, about the same thing. I've been to McGregor's last 2 fights. Those are always a freaking circus. And yeah, man, I just love love. You were talking about boxing, and I think UFC is that same way, where just the rush of a really big fight, man. I was getting that with Israel Adesanya versus Paulo Costa a couple weeks ago. But I love the sport for a little bit. My before Rotoworld, I worked with Action Network and Fantasy Labs, and was really trying to bring them some UFC content. I wasn't good at it because I've never been in a fight. I'm not someone that's training, and it's a little hard for me to break that down. But I was trying because I thought it was an open, field. Unfortunately, they decided to cut coverage. But to me, that I was mad at first, but then it was actually good because I was like, okay, I think it is healthy to have a little bit of a side thing that I'm not constantly investing my career in. So love me some UFC. Yeah,
I don't watch that much UFC, but I think it's really interesting, the idea of fighters with different strengths and weaknesses, match them up against each other, just like what we like about football, or watching soccer in the World Cup or something like that. When you see how like Indianapolis and Cleveland this week, how's that going to play out based on those teams' strengths and weaknesses? It's always an interesting experiment. It's always times about reducing variables, increasing success. Ian Hartitz work at PFF. IHARTITZ. Packing a lot in, man. I love the speed. I love the RPMs of your brain. It's great. It's great. I mean, it feels comfortable for me, which makes me wonder. Like, I hope we won't. Of course, people like slow down and speed up the podcast, do all kinds of stuff that I don't understand.
I was talking to Rich Rebar, maybe one of the best, might be the best.
Yeah,
that dude is freaking great. But
yeah,
he came on the pod and brought up the point. I was like, yeah, people have told him that they're usually on 1.25 or 1.5, but sometimes when he's talking, you gotta knock it down to 1. So I actually had I took speech therapy classes when I was a kid, and I think the problem looking back was my mind was just working a little too fast for my mouth to keep up. But I'll try to stay as legible as possible.
Yeah, my wife's a speech therapist, doing a lot of great work out there. Ian, try to keep up with them, folks. Try to keep up with us here, the Audible football guys. We love being part of your life, the calendar, the NFL. We appreciate. It's a privilege to serve. Stay classy, everyone.